Today I'm doing something unique, I think. I'm doing a video on the tangent of kids being able to figure out the first clue and possibly the second. This was all started by, well, it wasn't started, I don't think, but Jenny Kyle was the one that came up with the idea of the little girl in India. And the gist of that was, she said, what if there was a little girl in India? Would she be able to figure out any of the, the premise, for me at least, when you say the little girl in India as opposed to a professor sitting in Denver, little girl in India to me kind of implies she doesn't know as much about the country. If you gave her a map, she could kind of look generally at the map. She could make some decisions. Fenn later said it could be a little boy in Mexico or whatever, or little boys in India or something, or Mexico. I forget what he said. He was trying to, because people get so wound up with the idiosyncrasies of this thing. Fenn is not thinking in idiosyncratic terms. So, Jenny Kyle said that about the little girl in India. And then Fenn responded, well, yeah, she could see the first two clues, I think he said. And so in other times he's alluded to kids being able to have a good, maybe even a better chance of figuring out the treasure than adults. All of that to me says it's something that we're overthinking. Now at the same time I'm saying that, having done 4 trips now, I also think it's fair to say I've done some overthinking, but I'll also fair to say that ain't no little kid gonna go out and solve this. I almost called it a crime. Solve this puzzle. So, let's be real. But I actually did what I was supposed to do back before I went to Echo Park. Someone commented to me and said, don't you think the Blaze could still be in Echo Park? Absolutely. I don't know that it's not an Echo Park. I don't know that it's not in Denver, Colorado at Greenbelt Park. I don't know that it's not in Vermilion Creek. If I wake up someday and someone has found it in those places, I'll be like, damn, I thought of that. But that's the way it'll roll. Nothing you can really do about it if somebody finds it. Even if they use your own videos. I've covered that before. It's free information. So, having said all that, I'm going to use that as the premise of today's hopefully short video. I'll try to get right into it, because when I watch my videos over, I always think, man, you just talk way too much. So I'm going to do something, and we're going to get down to Fenn's verbiage. Remembering that almost everything we've seen about Fenn, he has either written his book or his poem, or interviews. Some have been written, but the vast majority have been in person, and they're in video, and of course a lot of people have transcribed them, thank goodness, so we can look at those interviews as well. But the point I'm trying to make is, the big thing about this is, Fenn said children in general could at least figure out the first 2 clues. That's what I take him to say. So I'm going to take it in that spirit. And I think because I did that, I was able to figure out the first clue. Possibly the second, since the second could very easily, you could tie it into the first. And it's going to sound a little wacky, and it's going to sound a little off kilter or far out. But all I'm going to ask you is, when I come up with these clues, for you to say, or maybe is the word juvenile, or maybe is the word childish. So real quickly, let me do something. I'm sorry I do this at this age. I prefer to just not worry about. It doesn't matter. This is Forrest Fenn describing his use of words. I'll try to say it very quickly. This is for Scrapbook 179, April 2017. It's probably on Dale Neitzel's page. April 2017, Forrest Fenn said, in high school I don't remember anyone giving me instructions on how to write. They probably did, and I just wasn't paying attention. So in later life, when I became interested in words and how they were used, I naturally gravitated to a trial and error style of writing that suited me best. In other words, Fenn is saying his way of writing is his way of writing. And that's what I try to keep in mind when I look at the poem. His poem doesn't necessarily have to mean what it means to me, to him. To him, it doesn't have to mean what it means to me. For Thrill of the Chase, he says, in 2011, when my book, Thrill of the Chase, won an award for Best Independently Published Book, I received a letter from the judges. They said my entry was, among other things, childish. I thought that was very interesting. His book they considered childish, and he said they must have thought that was pretty good, because otherwise how did I win the award? It started me thinking about how different people write. He said William F. Buckley Jr., who was a very conservative political person years ago, he's since died, he said he would literally, when he went to the New York Times, he would literally get on the subway or the train, and he would come up with his article for the day or his editorial for the day on the train and go in and just write it and go home. That was how he earned his dollar. Pretty cool, if you can do that. He rarely rewrote. No one ever dared to edit him. He said his method is Technicolor end of the writing spectrum. Mine is on the black and white. That's okay, because our composing modes are diabolically opposed to each other. My habit when writing something short is to decide on a subject, then start gathering sentences together with a focus, not so much direction. I try to stay close to the topic and carry my theme or plot to the end of the story. Now, he's talking about his book, but I think it's fair to say we could apply it to the poem, because listen to what he says then. Then I retreat to the beginning. I try to reorganize my words into some kind of acceptable, cohesive unit. How can I say a line better and keep it in the same flavor as the others? Is this sentence too predictable? Do I want to misspell a word? Now this is interesting. Do I want to misspell a word to make the reader stop and look it up? And maybe feel a need to respond? I use other techniques too, like corrupting a word or an idea. This is Forrest Fenn saying this. In my thrill book, I wrote about courting my wife. Everyone knew she was too good for me, but tenacity was never one of my shortcomings. That sort of thing causes the kind of word-of-mouth publicity that I need, because I self-publish and don't have any distribution. It's my way of keeping a reader's attention fresh. If one knows exactly what I mean, then who cares what the word is or how it's used? Educated editors disapprove of me en masse, but they don't have a Pulitzer either. Let me go back there. Did he win a Pulitzer? Nice, Thrill Chase won an award. Well, I'll have to edit this in. It does not say here that he won a Pulitzer, but maybe he's just saying, you know, hey, they didn't win a Pulitzer either. I think that's what he's saying. He's doing another. See, that's the way he thinks. He says things different than I would. I immediately go, you mean he won a Pulitzer? No, he's just saying, I don't have a Pulitzer and they don't either. I think that's what he's saying. I think I know of Forrest Fenn. It would be part of his lore that he'd won a Pulitzer. Okay, cool. I am frequently criticized for where I put commas. My reply is I don't want to use anyone's book writing rules. It is my prerogative as the writer to decide when I want the reader to pause, not the readers. So interesting when you think of that poem and how kind of quirky it is. I was almost going to say jerky, the way it writes, but you know, I'm an English major, and but I have probably as much knowledge as the average person who reads a lot, quite frankly. I think for most of us, it's kind of a quirky style of writing. Well, of course it's a quirky style of writing, that poem. It's an unusual poem. The hardest part of writing for me is sitting down and getting started. Some of my techniques develop themselves as I write along. For instance, I learned when researching my J.H. Sharp biography, the elderly Taos Indian models wouldn't answer my questions. I quickly decided that if I said something to them that I knew was wrong, they would correct me on and tell me things I wanted to know. Some success sometimes hides in squinting wrappings. Success sometimes hides in squinting wrappings, but a delicate new bow, if tied correctly, can widen eyes. I didn't even know what the hell that means. I wrote this someplace a few years ago. Maybe you'll think it's worth remembering. Imagination isn't a technique, it's a key. Now that goes back to what I've been trying to learn myself. This man is expecting us to not take everything at just face value. He expects us to bend with him and flow and get into his way of looking at it. What Forrest Fenn is really doing with this entire treasure hunt is making us think like Forrest Fenn. Ooh, I don't want that. All right, so let's get down to it. We're sticking with the premise of kids, and although I think it was good to put in that bit about his writing style. His writing style is his own. It's unique. He bends words, he says. He tricks you with, he puts punctuations in different places. He changes it all around, kind of James Joycean, to prove that I am kind of an English major. James Joyce, if you ever read his works, he would do exactly that. He would just change the punctuation. Everyone's like, oh God, it's so insanely creative. That what's he doing? He's making me think different. He's changing the punctuation around. Never did care for James Joyce. Never cared for any of the big people I was supposed to admire, just like Fenn talking about in the Border Store. Never cared for Ernest Hemingway. Never got through one of his books. Never got through, and never cared for Fitzgerald. Fitzgerald did a little better. I got through things like The Great Gatsby at school, but he just didn't strike me as a good. I mean, the biggest story about Gatsby was that he's such a freaking alcoholic, and he and his dramatic life with his girlfriend / wife, blah blah, the Roaring '20s. That to me was more exciting to learn about than his writing. Okay, we're getting to the end here.